We thought you work to 65 and however much money you have is what you retire with. But at the end of the day, we realized you don't need to do that. And so a big part of it was just being disciplined and saving and investing from an early age and then reaping the benefits of compounding over time. You still can work, but maybe you can start your own business. Maybe you can work part-time, but it gives you the flexibility, the independence basically to do things on your own terms without having to rely on just the thing that everyone else does and the thing that everyone's parents did and their parents did. It was really just understanding the mathematical definition of achieving financial independence. So once I learned that, then I realized, well, I don't have to work anymore.
Welcome to the Kaizen Blueprint, the podcast dedicating to helping you achieve a better life through continuous improvement. If you're ready to elevate your finances, grow your investment, and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. Each episode brings an expert insight on personal development, finance, and real estate, giving you the tools to build lasting success. Now, let's go to today's episode. Steven, how's it going? Welcome to the Kaizen Blueprint podcast. How are you?
We're doing well, Aldo. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start off big. I met you at a financial independence event. What does financial independence mean for you, or freedom?
Basically, I think financial independence means the ability to do what you want on your own terms when it comes to like earning money or having a career or living. So the traditional, I think, approach is you work for 30, 40, 50 years, 9-to-5 job. And then when you're in your 60s or 70s, you retire. But financial independence is basically about, realizing you have enough money to not need to work for the rest of your life and then to do things you want to do. You still can work, but maybe you can start your own business. Maybe you can work part-time, but it gives you the flexibility, the independence basically to do things on your own terms without having to rely on just the thing that everyone else does and the thing that everyone's parents did and their parents did.
So I'm just thinking, right, based on the answer you just said, I think delayed gratification is a huge aspect of it. And the financial independence is basically that. What I'm hearing from you from the business aspect is that you work really hard in the beginning for you to delay all that gratification to have that sense of freedom down the line.
Yeah, and to be honest, we actually didn't know about financial independence till much further in our career. My wife and I, we were working a good 15 plus years before we even understood what that meant. So we were going in, we thought you work to 65 and however much money you have is what you retire with. But at the end of the day, we realized you don't need to do that. And so a big part of it was just being disciplined and saving and investing from an early age and then reaping the benefits of compounding over time. And yes, there is some delayed gratification, but we're not depriving ourselves. We didn't live on rice and beans. We didn't, live in a, small house. We bought a house, we bought cars, we still travel. It's just that we learned to, whatever money we had left over, save and invest that money. And that money grew and got to a point where we had enough money in our investments that we didn't need to continue working.
How were you specifically, Stephen, not you and Amy, your wife, how were you kind of in that time frame sparked that kind of personal finance stuff in the beginning? Like when you're working on W-2, you were saving, compounding. What kind of sparked that? Was it your environment? Was it the people that you talked to? Was it your parents? What kind of sparked that?
I think it was a combination of my parents just seeing what they taught me. They were very responsible with their money, and my dad actually got me to invest early. I think I opened a Roth IRA when I was in college, and I had summer jobs, and just that. And then I had a degree in economics and finance, and so my work was in finance. So I kind of always had that mindset of like thinking about financially. So I was comfortable with like understanding the industry, understanding how to put together models, and just project out numbers. And so right after, I just knew all along that I just had to invest my money and that over time it would grow and, I'd have more money and it would keep growing.
Now, when you met growing your money, is this in specific investments like stocks, real estate?
Yeah, I kept it pretty simple. I was in mutual funds early on. Maybe I had a couple of individual stocks that I might have gotten through like my employer through a stock purchase plan. But really, I didn't want to like spend a lot of time like researching a lot of different things. So I did mutual funds, and I probably picked 5 or 6 and made it a point to invest money every month. And I did that for 15 years. whether the market was up or the market was down. And I was fortunate that I got to deal with some market downturns, which meant I was investing more and then it would grow. But I didn't spend a lot of time day trading. I didn't spend a lot of time moving in and out of things. I try to keep it very simple. And I think that was a key for me that really worked, that time in the market and that keeping things simple with mutual funds. And I've since moved to index funds, which are even better than some mutual funds because they're be cheaper to buy. But just keeping it simple. I know a lot of people might be interested in real estate or alternative investments like crypto or gold. I always felt that I had to understand what I was investing in and didn't want to take the time to research more things. So there's a lot of research on how to do mutual fund investing or index fund investing. And so that was what I was most comfortable with.
Got it. And these are slow growth. These are not just like Nvidia, right? Or GameStop, where it's just these are in a compound interest that you accumulated.
Right. You hope that if you buy an index fund and you can track the market, well, if that grows 7 to 9% a year, you're going to grow 7 to 9% a year. But over 15, 20 years, that's going to be a lot more money than you started out with. Especially when you think of the idea of like the rule of 72, which basically says if you take 72 and divide by growth rate, that's how long it'll take your money to double. So if you assume an 8% growth rate, the rule of 72, every 9 years, your money will double. And so if you think about that over 15, 20 years, you're doubling two and a half times, assuming a 8 or 9% growth rate. And it may start out small, but then over time, the bigger it never gets, the bigger it'll double to the next 9, 10 years.
Yeah. 15 years is a long time, right? What were your thoughts during that entire, that 15 years mark of that slow growth? Were you bored? Did you try to look for something else? What kind of pushes you to that continuous delayed gratification?
I think I probably didn't know any better at the time, to be honest. I didn't know about the financial independence movement at that time. And so I just thought that, well, this is what you have to do. You work to 65. So you keep investing if you can, and we could. Now, in fairness, I don't think it was fully delayed gratification. I still traveled a lot. I still bought things. I just always made sure to live within my means and make sure that whatever I was spending money on, it was in my values. And so I was still saving a lot of money every year. And the reality is I don't have a lot of needs of things. I don't desire a lot of physical things. I prioritize more experiences, which is travel or maybe eating out, but I don't need the newest gadget. I probably was 3 or 4 years into smartphones before I even got a smartphone. And I didn't feel deprived. It's just that I need it. And even now, if you ask me what I want for my birthday or something, I don't know. I don't desire things the way others may desire things. And that's not saying that if you desire something, it's wrong. It's just that that's how I was wired and that's how I operated my life. And I think it enabled me to just keep going at things and enjoying my experiences through travel or, eating out or maybe doing a cultural event versus spending money on gadgets that, get dusty after like 6 months.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of younger folks here, especially the ones that's watching the show, the social media aspect plays a huge role in that comparison thing where you look at people on social media showing the perfect world that they're in with all the materialistic goods. So as a vulnerable mind at a young age, they tend to see that as success. Where when I went to where we met, the financial independence, I mean, there are people who significantly are wealthy and living below their means, but just wear regular clothes, drive regular cars, and these are the true millionaires, not the ones that's driving a Lamborghini on a loan and going on a private jet, seeing that it was only a rental plane. But my point is, because of today's access to so many social media aspects and people have so much free time, they look at it as like, Steven, you're already 15 years. That's too long for me. I'm trying to get what you get in 15 years in 1 or 5. What are your thoughts on today's society on that?
No, I think it's a valid point. And I mean, I saw that when I was still working, even in just interviewing candidates that were, younger, and they were in a job for a year and a half. Then they're running for the next job because they want the next up of a pay or the next promotion. And I can understand definitely from a social media standpoint how that can influence and, push someone in a certain direction. And that can work. It's just that there's a lot more risk involved, or it may backfire to try to assume that whatever, quick way to get rich is out there may not work. Someone gets sucked into the crypto, situation. Well, we see how volatile Bitcoin can be, and maybe they do well for the first 6 months, but then it could, fall apart. So it definitely is. It's a long process, and I like to think of it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think probably I was fortunate too that I wasn't in the big social media world when I started this journey back in the early 2000s. And so once I set things up and sort of forgot about it, it just kind of did its own thing. But you really have to, I think, decide on what are your priorities and what are your values in life. And if you do want to get to like early financial independence, there are ways to do it, but you just have to realize that it might take a little bit longer than you want, but that even if it takes 10 years, well, that's still 30 plus years potentially of enjoying the benefits versus, working another 40 years and only having maybe 20 or 30 years total. So you have to really, I think, step back a little bit and decide if that's what you want. That's okay to be different than what your friends might be doing and what social media says to do, because at some point, if you do achieve that early financial independence, even in, 35 or 40 or even earlier than that, most people are still going to be working, but you won't be. Or most people, you might, or either working, or you may be able to do whatever you want instead of, working for someone else.
Yeah, 100%. I think within today's society, we don't want to work that long. We want to do it expeditely, right?
Right.
That's why if you're on YouTube, you'll see all those videos where it's like, these are the 5 ways to make money, 10x your money in 3 months or like 3 days, right? And if someone is is showing you a shortcut, then it's completely not a shortcut. It's just for them to sell you something. It's a clickbait, right? I'm in the content creation now. I'm learning what it feels like to be a producer and how much attention that you want to get. So you're looking at all these kind of lead magnets, or just trying to get you in, right, to this platform, to the what's it called, funnel, right? So I could see that from a producer standpoint, but I just watched a video just recently, and he said that if there's shortcuts, then that means that they're just selling you on something. The people who are doing it
Yeah.
well and doing it for a long time, they work really hard for it, and there's absolutely no shortcuts. They just go in and delay gratifications, and it's push even further, and then they reap the benefits afterwards.
Right. And I think you don't hear a lot about those people because their story may seem boring to others. I don't really have a product to sell. I don't have an amazing success story or how to like triple my money in like 3 weeks. I just had a let time and compounding work. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not glamorous. And you have to really be disciplined to be able to do that. But I think my story shows that it does work. It just figuring out how far you need to take, to go with it will determine how long it will take you to get there. I think had I known about financial independence now, I don't think it would have taken 15 years. We just learned what financial independence was at the 15-year mark and was already there. In fact, I probably had saved more than I needed at that point. So if I was starting over now, I probably wouldn't necessarily need 15 years, but it would not be 1 or 2 for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. So we talked about the process, right? The beginning stages of how you achieve your financial independence, subjectively speaking. And you worked really hard for it. You had a W-2, you live below your means or at your means, and then you're investing the rest of that in mutual funds and eventually index funds. Now you're at a point where you are reaping the rewards, so to speak. And let me ask you this, what kind of triggered that? What was that shifting moment of like, okay, I'm done with the process. Now I'm reaping the rewards. What kind of triggered that?
I think really understanding for me what the model was to essentially retire early. As I mentioned, I always thought you just retire to 65 because that's when you take Social Security. That's what everyone did. And I thought whatever money you had at that point is just what you retired with. Or you read these articles about you need 80 to 90% of your income. Okay, well, that seems like a lot versus realizing it's more about what you spend. And once I learned that, that's really about what you spend and figured out how much money I spend, I realized had achieved a financial independence. So it was really just understanding the mathematical definition of achieving financial independence, which kind of is the 4% rule, or you need 25 times your annual expense or 4% of your portfolio every year. That should outlive, outlive you. So once I learned that, then I realized, well, I don't have to work anymore. And I realized that, well, if I don't have to do this anymore and there are other people not doing this anymore, then I'm not going to do it anymore. That I'm not the only one doing it. And I learned too, and understanding, once I learned about financial independence, I found this whole community of people that were in the same situation. I'm like, wow, there are other people who have done the same thing. Some people have more than me, some people have less than me, they spend differently, but like there's this whole group of people doing this. And so it's not this abnormal thing out there, not gonna be some, solitary person trying something different, that there are groups of people out there doing this. And so that gave me confidence too, to be like, okay, I don't need to keep working anymore. And I think it worked out well too. I was getting to the point in my career, I was a little bit tired of moving up the ladder. I was happy where I was, but I was like, I don't know if I can't see myself interviewing at another job. I can't see myself wanting another promotion. So from a mindset, I think the timing worked well too, learning about financial independence and realizing, well, I've hit the maximum in my career that I want to go. This is the perfect time to transition out of that and start then reaping the benefits of all my investing and saving over the years.
So was there a significant event that kind of triggered that point? Was it like an overnight thing where like, screw it, I'm retired? Or was it like
So
a
I think
continuous?
I would say understanding the model. Like my wife was always like, hey, you should just quit your job early. I'm like, how do you do that? I don't know. It just seemed overwhelming and intimidating. But then once she actually is the one that stumbled upon Mr. Money Mustache, who wrote about the 4% rule and early retirement. Once I learned about that and read his blog, and I was like, I have my model. I have the formula for how to do it. Being a finance person, I did a lot of budgets at my job. And so I always needed like a plan in place, financial plan in place to do things. And so this was the financial plan that I was missing all along, that I didn't understand. And it's just that simple as the 4% rule, and making sure you have, based on what you spend. And so once I learned that, then it was like, okay, now I can do this. That really was the trigger point. It's like, hey, this is how the math has to work for me, because I always need to get comfortable with the numbers. And before understanding the financial independence movement, I didn't know how to get comfortable with the numbers. So I didn't know what the upper limit had to be. I just thought there was no upper limit. The more you have, the better you'll do. But then once I realized I don't need to keep building the portfolio, then I realized, well, I can make that shift. And I was ready to make that shift because I'd been over 15 years in my career.
Now, is that because you're able to project, or you're not project, but the history of your expenses, like you can keep that consistent? It's not like you make, let's say you start off making 100,000 and you're spending, 50 grand or something like that for whatever expenses a year. And then now you're making like 200, but it doesn't go up. It still remain like the 50,000. Is that what you mean by
Yeah, that was a
kind
big
of?
part of it. Or even knowing that I ended up leaving my job with, I have to withdraw less than 4% of my portfolio. So that gave me some extra cushion in terms of pulling money out. And so I've been able to look at our annual expense and be like, okay, even if we increased it X percent or Y percent, we're still under the 4% rule. So I have a wiggle room to actually, make it work. But the reality is, tracking expenses was important. Honestly, I never did that when I was working, but once I learned about financial independence, I started tracking more closely what do we spend our money on, and then figuring out going forward, some things might go up. We're traveling more. Some things like healthcare costs a little bit more, but there are other things that I don't spend a lot of money on. Like I don't drive to work anymore, so my car doesn't get a lot of mileage or a lot of wear and tear. I don't need new clothes really because I don't have all that. So I can be at home, so I don't have to eat out for lunch as much. So there's a lot of things that some things go up, some things go down, and the expenses have changed a bit, but not dramatically. It's not like I've said, "Oh, I'm free now. I'm going to live off my investments. I'm going to triple what I spend." No, it's just
Yeah,
I may spend things differently, but it all is kind of in the general bucket of total dollars that still works with our portfolio.
that's good. I think there's a common theme in this entire episode for you, Stephen, where you don't compare yourself to other people so that you're not buying these materialistic good. You value experience significantly more than like material stuff. And you kind of see that now too, as you reap the reward, is that you're, even though you're taking money out of your portfolio and then you're spending it, it's still below your means. You're not spending that much money, but it'll give you enough cushion for you, until whatever age that you live on. So
Right.
that's good. So I would like to move on into the relationship with your wife and also the finance aspect. Majority of divorces now are because majority of them are monetary issues. So how are you and your wife kind of track finances together and talk about that, especially when you guys first started dating and now?
Sure. When we first started dating, or I don't think we talked much about it before we were dating, but we both were very, I would say we were fortunate that, from both of our parents, paid for our college. So we didn't have any debt. And so we were starting out on a positive footing. And we both came from families that had good mindsets with money, didn't overspend, didn't get into debt, only bought things when they could afford them. So we had that going for us, which I know is, a privilege. And we're definitely very fortunate we had that. We did combine our money very early, and I just started taking our combined money and investing it. And I would make sure she was on the same page, be like, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to work. And she agreed on that, and we just kind of let it run for all these years. And then as we got to bigger decisions, like whether it's buying a house or making changes, paying down a mortgage or things like that, we would always make sure to talk with each other. We'd have occasional meetings and just how much of, how's our investments look, do we have to, what do we have to do? And then as we got closer to this financial independence thing, that's when we really started to talk more about it, especially once we learned about it. And my wife, she quit a few months after learning about financial independence, and I quit a few years after. But we really connected even more in that because we had to understand where we were spending our money and making sure that we'd have enough money to live for, another 40 plus years. And so we spend a lot of time talking about our finances. We review our expenses now probably every month or two. When we have to make decisions about selling stuff, we sit down and talk about it. So everything's kind of done together. I may make the actual moves in our system, but we were talking about, hey, I want to move X $1,000 from this account to that account. Are you good? Yes. So everything's on the same page, and she'll can push back and be like, well, let's think about this instead, or I want to spend some money on this next year and make sure we have enough money to account for that. And so we were very aligned on that. And I think it's the only way I feel that, enjoying this financial independence time would work. If I was doing my own thing and she was doing her own thing, and every once in a while we just looked at our numbers and be like, oh, that's what we spent, or that's where we are. Like, I think it would be more stressful, and I think we'd have more issues. But really, just we had a good upbringing, and we always just made sure to kind of stay connected on all of our financial decisions. And I think her values were the same. She's very similar. She doesn't desire a lot of things either. So that helped a lot.
That's good. What advice would you give, I guess, people who are in the dating world in regards to finances? Because that don't really get talk a lot, especially in the first
Yeah.
few dates.
Yeah. I think that's something that you shouldn't be afraid to talk about it earlier, than later. It doesn't have to be specific numbers, but just kind of get a sense of the partner's mindset. What do they like to spend their money on? Do they value things or experiences? Do they have a lot of debt, or how do their parents, deal with money? Just to kind of understand what you're getting into, because it's, I think it could be dangerous to, date. And then if you end up going further, then start to realize that there's potentially differences in money habits or money history, because that could change things and add a lot of drama and stress that, won't be good. So yes, it's taboo, but I think we should be open to talking about it more and kind of, start, slowly stepping into it earlier and earlier in conversations.
In your experience with talking to other couples, do you see a trend or do you see a pattern how other partners or couples interact with each other in regard to finances?
I'm seeing, especially in, young learners, I'm seeing more people open to talking about things earlier. I know people that, are single but engaged in the financial independence community. They're definitely open about talking about these things. And so I do feel that we're moving towards it not being as taboo a subject as it might have been 20 or 30 years ago to talk about. And again, it doesn't have to be about numbers. It's just about, a lot about philosophy and mindset. That can tell a lot about a partner in terms of like, does it work or not? But I am encouraged that I think there's more discussion about it, especially with like podcasts out there and more articles about, the financial independence community and, having healthy relationships among spouses and partners, that there's definitely more a movement towards more open communication about it.
How
That
did
being said,
that,
it's not an easy thing, and I understand.
yeah. did that came about, like the financial independence? Because when I first started, right, I was 16 years old and I was on what was the app called Quora. It's a bunch of it's basically a kind of older Reddit, maybe not. So Quora is people who ask questions and there's people who answered. That's basically the gist of the platform. And that was before I found Reddit with all the churning and credit cards and things like that. But at the time, I was just looking up I was like 16 or 18 at the time, like how to make money as 16-year-old, or what advice would you give like a teenager starting out in a financial independence? And I didn't find the financial independence movement until like a year or 2 years ago, but it was already been big for a while. I'm just curious, do you know the history why or how it became what it is today?
I think Mr. Money Mustache, who's one of the, original bloggers, started writing in about 2011 or so.
Mm.
And again, I didn't learn about it till 2017. So I went a whole 5, 6 years, this whole, world out there that I'm like, how did I not stumble upon it? Even in just a Google, how Google shows you stuff online. And you're like, how did that not even show up in any of my feeds at some point? The person that retired at age 40, like, so
Yeah.
I think there was that. And though interestingly, I think when it started, it was a lot more about, really delayed gratification, but more extreme. I mean, there was another blogger, like, I think he lived on like $7,000 a year, he was single and all that. But like a lot of the early writing was about like not spending money at all. And it's kind of evolved, but I do think it's been going on for almost 15 years now. It just took, more people to learn about it before there were more blogs and more articles and more podcasts on it. And I think in the beginning too was a lot of engineers and people in finance that were engaged in it. And then it's definitely grown into being a much more diverse community now. And, there's more ways too, through real estate and, entrepreneurship and all that. But before it was just like engineers that had saved a lot of money and knew how to optimize things.
Yeah, I think when the engineer, it is because you're making a lot of money, right? And then you're trying to figure out how to diversify and make more money with the amount of income that you're coming in, and it kind of shift gears now into the economic cycles where like everybody is losing money, and we're like, what are the ways to make more money? So it's out of convenience and then turn into desperation and necessity into making more money, and that's why people are looking into different investments and to make more money. And obviously they need to be frugal, live below their means, and investing most of their money and not spending it so frivolously.
I also think COVID had something to do with it too, in the sense of people started working from home, people started having more flexibility in the way their lives were, I realized, and then not wanting to deal with like going back to the office and working the grind. And so it got a lot of people to think maybe outside the box more and try different things and dive into like, different ways of approaching their careers.
Yeah, the side hustles has got really big too. I mean, this is my
Yes.
side hustle as we speak, right? But people are starting to realize, especially the younger folks, right? Because you're getting into schools, universities, and it's a significant amount of debt if not properly managed, the finances, because it was in in those shoes, and Stephen, you're probably were in that shoes too, but maybe as in a different generation. But when going, I was about to go to college. I ended up not going to college right after high school. I actually went to study abroad in Germany for a year and see where that takes me. But I remember in my senior year of high school, they were kind of pushing the counselors, the teachers, the parents. They're pushing was like, "Oh, what school you're going to?" And kind of if you're going to Ivy League school, then they're judging you positively. And then if you're going to a Joe Schmo school in the community college or something like that, they're like, "Oh, so." But regardless of where you're going, they're kind of pushes you into going to universities. And what sucks is that, and I've seen this in the European university and the American university, is that the difference is once you go to an American, you have these gen eds, right? You're going to different subjects, and sometimes you don't even like it, but you still have to pass because that affects your GPA. However, if you go to the one in Europe, it's pretty much specialized. Like once you're in there, like that's where you're going. And that's why my parents took me to Germany. One is because the school universities are free. but they don't realize how hard German is. But I've seen the huge difference in the two universities. And the thing is with Americans, you're pushing these students into going to these universities, not knowing what they want to do. And they ended up
Hmm.
not being focused into the said subjects and being more focused of what happens outside. And that's why you see fraternities, sororities, extracurricular activities. And then once they get into that mid mark, like after sophomore or during sophomore year, like, oh crap, like I really have to figure something out. Or maybe not. No. And it gets a little bit late of like, okay, it's senior year. I'm in my engineer degree. I hate calculus 3 or I hate doing chemistry or something like that. And you just have to finish, but then you're so in so much debt that if you change subjects or majors, then that would be additional cost. And now you're in this deep hole of like, I hate what I'm going to do, but I have to pass anyway, or I'm going to lose more money. So screw it. I'm just going to try to enjoy or not enjoy what I'm going to do. And what happens is after they graduate, is that they don't do what they wanted to do. They don't apply for that job. So then now you're seeing people who's doing the service industry, having a side hustles, or doing completely something else, not what they studied for the past 4 years. So, sorry for the rant, but it's just the trend that I'm seeing currently. And have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, a few things. Yes, I feel like there's still, or there definitely was, and probably still is, a lot of pressure from like parents and the older generation to push their children to get college degrees because that's what they did and that's what their parents did. And there's definitely, it's nice to have a degree from a certain prestigious university, but I do see on the flip side, and encouragingly, a shift to realizing that in some ways the degree may be more important than where you get the degree and what you get the degree in versus just going to an Ivy League school. You know I went to a top university, and if I had a chance to do it over again, or if my child wanted to do it, I would not even consider that university because the price is ridiculous. It's not sustainable. And that even in my career and interviewing people that I didn't care what their degree was. I just wanted to see that their work ethic. Yes, having a college degree was important, but like it didn't matter as much where it was as it might have mattered 15, 20 years ago. And so I think the college costs are getting out of control, that I think it's more important to like, go there if it makes sense to you, but don't just go there just because. And I do think it's hard on the flip side at 20 years old to know what are you going to do with your life, and to make that commitment to go to a college that specifies in a certain area. I don't know, maybe I think I want to be a doctor, but then I invest all this time and money and like, I hate it. But now what do you do? So, to get another degree here. So it's definitely challenging. And I think it's definitely something that people can get sucked into, and it'll put them maybe in the wrong starting place if they am having to go into a lot of debt. If they am getting a degree that, what do you do with like a history degree or a, philosophy degree kind of thing. So, but there's still that pressure of, I think, from older generations that that's what you should do because that's what we did.
What alternative do you have for a kid who's like maybe what 17, 16 years old, still in high school, taking classes, and they're about to go to college, obviously in a few years. As if this, think of it as like your kid, right? What you have done, or the younger Stephen back then? What would you have done, knowing that the society here is today, where it's expensive colleges, they're pushing you towards it, but you already have this knowledge of what's going to happen or how you figure things out. What
And
advice
I
would you
think,
give that?
yeah, I don't think college should necessarily be ignored. I think there are ways to make it cheaper that could still be value. So maybe you can take some high school classes that give you college credit, go to community college for a year, and then maybe you only need to spend 1 or 2 extra years in a 4 year college. So if you can cut a year off of college, you just save 25% of a cost. Or, maybe that you want to get into a vocation, like you want to be a mechanic or, an electrician, or you really like tinker stuff. And maybe you get more of a technical school that teaches you that trade if that's what you really enjoy. So I think there are ways there are ways to save on the cost, and there are ways to expedite getting through that process so you're not wasting a lot of money and getting into as much debt as the traditional path would take you. But it definitely is hard, and I think you have to give yourself some time to just try through things and dabble in it. Do I enjoy doing this? Enjoy doing that? And see. And so maybe you have to take a year off and travel the world just to sort of give yourself a break, and then come back. Get your mind clear, and you can be like, okay, I'm ready to go learn about doing X, Y, and Z. or like you said, just fast track your way through college to get a degree without spending as much money as, a bigger school would cost. But
Yeah,
it's
that
definitely a
that
challenge out there.
yeah, 100%. I think that community college is a great advice because that's exactly what I've did. Not in my first year. In my first year, I went to Penn State, and it wasn't even Penn State, Maine, because it was in the middle of nowhere. I went to a
Mhm.
satellite school, and the reason why I went to the satellite school is because I was paying, I think, like $700 per semester, and but it sucked in a way where I had to drive an hour plus in a very like traffic highway. But I remember it was the 8 a.m. class sucked because I have to get up at 6 just to go at 8 a.m. But I was paying like $700 per semester, and I should have went to community college, was just much closer. But I had kind of like ego at the time, where
Mhm.
like I don't want to go to community college. But the great thing was that at the time we weren't making a lot of money, so the financial aid actually exceeds the tuition. So as a result, we were getting paid to go to college. I was like, damn, why didn't I do this first?
Okay.
And then what I did was the classes that I took in community college, I made sure that it could transfer over the following year into like the state school that I went in afterwards. So then
Mhm.
when I go there, it was all set in stone because I didn't want to just do associates. So what I did was I transferred. I made sure all the classes are aligned, and they could be moved into the new school as credits. And when I got there, I was still in the same trajectory to graduate at the time
Yeah.
that I wanted to graduate. So that's a very good advice.
Right. But then you saw that too, like you had to have a plan for that. It's easy just to go to four-year school and say I'm going to spend 4 years there, but you went a couple different ways, but like you knew that once you got into community college route that it would then transfer to a state school. And so that was kind of the key versus just I'll start here and see what comes of it. Just like anything else in life, you have to spend some time figuring out how it's going to work over the next several years.
Yeah, I had three just overarching goals just for simplicity. One was to graduate without any debt, which is really, really good, right? That's very hard nowadays. Number two is graduate, obviously, because you went to school for so many years. Obviously, the end goal is to graduate and get that piece of paper that I still don't know where I got where's my diploma to this day. I think it's like in a storage or something like that, but I don't even know where it's at. I never even hung it up, and I didn't go to my graduation ceremony because it was during COVID. So, and then the third goal when I was going to college was to network, and I think a lot of younger folks, they network with the
Mhm.
wrong people. Your peers are great for you to network and have conversations with, but it's they what was it when you had those what is it, the hours that the teachers allotted, that the teachers allotted for office hours.
Office hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would have office hours, and when in the middle of the semester, no one would go, right? People go to office hours for two things. One is asking answers for homework, and then number two, asking for the study guide for the upcoming test, which affects majority of the grade, right? But then in the middle, where you have the teachers will still there in office hours, I would just jump in for like 15 minutes and just have a conversation with the teachers because one, they have a lot of network too. They're a professor for a reason, and they I'm pretty sure they talk to a lot of other professors. And another one, they have great connections too. They're older folks who are a specialized in a certain field. So then you're asking them certain questions, and like, who do I should reach out to? And that kind of helped me find that real estate was the thing for me. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's an underappreciated skill, and I don't think it's encouraged enough in school. Is like networking for business purposes or for career purposes. I mean, people might network in college, like, oh, I want to get into this fraternity, so let me network with the guys that are in that fraternity. But like the harder thing is really networking from a professional standpoint, and there's not like a
Hmm.
class on that, but I do think it's some people are good at that, but a lot of people are not and are intimidated
Yeah.
by that or don't even know to do that, and that's something I think that's great that you were able to do that and that, more people could, I think, take a lesson from and try to do that. Or even as you said, it's 5, 10 minutes, just like, I'm interested in X, who should I talk to? Very
Yeah.
basic,
Yeah.
but it can get you a
Yeah.
long way.
Similar to how you invest, the networking is as a compound effect as well. It's crazy that we met sometime last year, I think in October, and we kind of stayed in touch. And then look where we are now. And there's other ways to network as well, but you're planting seeds when you're talking and having conversations with people, and when they remember what you do and how you do it, and know who you are, they're like, oh yeah, I know that guy who does this, let me connect you. And that's why it's called network, right? You kind of connect with other people that
You.
knows other people to get whatever it is that you want. So we talked about, oh, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to add too that, yeah, my career, even though I don't consider myself a networker, my career, I worked at 3 different employers over 20 years. And the first one was, out of college. So I had to I went in not knowing anyone, but then my second and third employer, I knew people going into that opportunity. So I was fortunate through my work career that people I knew was how I got my next job. And that made it a lot easier than applying for a job where no one at the organization knew me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even college is important, but then as you're going through your career, it's the same thing. You never know who a coworker or a former supervisor could be at another organization that you may want to go to one day.
Yeah, makes sense. So we talk about the process into financial independence. We talk about the reaping the rewards slightly, and then we talked about the partners, and now we're diving into college. But I want to shift gear back into the reaping the rewards. And you mentioned multiple times during this episode that you really enjoy traveling, right? That's one of the expense that you don't mind spending, because travel creates experience. Experience create a perpetual kind of memories in your head. I can remember when I
Mhm.
did a solo trip in Iceland, but I can't remember what I bought like last week, right? Or my subscription expenses. But I remember all these experiences that has happened, the people that I've met, the things that I have experienced. And you are a traveler yourself. And I want to talk about credit cards, which is something that we both are somewhat passionate about in a way. But I wanted to know more about what kind of kick-started the travel hacking that you're doing, because it didn't happen, years ago. It just happened recently. What was that process look
Yeah,
like in the
I
beginning?
I probably started the credit card hacking around the same time I learned about the financial independence, movement. And I think partly because some of the people involved in it were writing a lot about credit card hacking and getting a bunch of cards. And so for those that know it, basically it's you you sign up for a credit card that rewards travel points, whether it's to a hotel or an airline or a bank that can be transferred to other, travel partners. And you sign up for a card and get the sign-on bonus after you meet a minimum spend. And what a lot of people do is they'll sign up for a card, meet the spend, get a bonus, and then move on to another card, get the, meet the spend. Maybe it's like three or four or $5,000 over 3 months, get a bonus, and they keep doing that, and then they rack up a lot of points, and then they can stay at hotels for free. They can, get flights for free. So I started doing that shortly after learning about financial independence, and I dabbled a little bit, got a few cards here and there, but not really, no kind of structure to my thinking. But then I would say once I quit my job, then I really went more into it, and probably have between myself and my wife, we probably have about over 25 cards right now. We don't
Wow.
spend on a lot of them, but we've had, we have hundreds of thousands of points that we can then use to fly around the world or stay at hotels for very little cash outlay. It's
What?
definitely, something you have.
No, no, go ahead.
Sure. It's definitely something you have to be disciplined on and organized on. You have to pay off your bill every month. I have to make sure to set automatic payments on all my bills so that I don't miss this, paying a credit card off. And then just tracking your points. There's a lot of work, but like I enjoy that, and I have the time now to do that because otherwise it would just be, if I was working, I don't think I could do this. But now that I'm not working, I have the time to kind of keep tabs on all my cards and all the points and all that.
What was the cards that you had in the beginning, and how has that changed over time to where you are today? Let's just strategize. So like the
Mhm.
strategy you had in the beginning, and then the strategy you have now.
So the very beginning, I probably got a United credit card because I live in Houston and they were based out of Houston. So it made sense. Oh, I fly United a lot. And when I was still working, I would fly a lot, decent amount for work, or we would take 2 or 3 trips a year, and I would make sure to fly them to get the benefits, get stats with them. So I had that card. We probably had 1 or 2 cashback cards that, had no annual fees, but that, could get 5% back on certain categories in a given quarter. But then and we had those cards for years, and in fact, I still have those cards. But then I started getting into hotel cards, and airline cards, and I pretty much got all kinds of cards. So I got some hotel cards because you pay an annual fee, maybe $95, but you get a free night at a hotel. So I can do better than $95 on my free night. I have a few airline cards just for the benefits, but the big thing I've gotten more into recently is transferable points cards. So these are cards from Chase or American Express that give you points that can be transferred to a bunch of different partners they have. So different airlines or different hotel chains. So those are really what I've spent a lot more of my time, trying to get, because they're so much more valuable to be able to choose from a bunch of different partners to send it to. Because I can pretty much get anywhere around the world I want on one of the airlines that partner
Yeah,
up with these games.
interesting because my strategy was a complete different than yours. So I didn't know about the airlines or the hotels. I just knew about, well, let me tell you a story. When I first started the credit cards, it was because of necessity. It wasn't because like, oh, I saw a video, which I did. I watched a video of this guy traveling around the world and had like, million cards. And he was like, it's like a Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? Or Pokemon cards. He just had like a whole stack and then it'd show it. And I got traveled to here, here, here. I was like, that's complete BS. There's no way. But when I first started the credit card game, I started like when I first could get a credit card was 18. I got a Discover It student because obviously I didn't have that much credit, and that's typically the card that people get or students that they get, and I recommend it to other people. But they just got bought by Capital One, so I don't know how that's gonna change. But so 5% cash back on rotating categories every quarter. I got that, and then out of necessity, because I was doing a fix and flip at the time, a real estate fix and flip where you buy, renovate, and then you sell at a higher price. And I was over budget with my rehab costs, and because I was 18 at the time, all my friends were in debt already. My parents didn't want to give me money, so I had to go into business credit cards, unsecured line of credit, pull credit out of my current personal cards, and obviously that shows on your credit report. So I was down to like the 500s. My credit score was like 500s for like 3 months. It was the scariest time. I get all these notifications like, yeah, balance due, interest incurred. But that's something that I don't recommend anyone doing. But in regards to the strategy you just mentioned, like I started off as the Chase, I think the Ink, one of the Ink products, I think it was preferred or something, and then that gave me a unsecured line of credit to pay off the remaining rehab that I had to do, and luckily we finished the project, get a little bit of money. But yeah, I from Chase, like I expanded into the multiple different cards and turned into Amex, right? Because I learned that with Amex, you get, once you sign up for the first time, that's your only hard inquiry. And what happens subsequently after that is that there's soft inquiry. And what that means is hard inquiry shows up in your credit report, soft inquiry, they just look at your score, but it doesn't show up on your credit report as inquiry, which is one of the things that affects your credit score temporarily. So that's what I did, and kind of expanded into that. Now I'm kind of where you were before. I was looking into, okay, what hubs are in this airport, and then now just trying to maneuver how can I use these airline points to do that. But I haven't spent that much money on or points on from the transferable points that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think for me too, when I started, it was kind of this shiny object syndrome. Like, oh, well, this Marriott card has a high bonus. I'll go with that. I didn't know as much as I do now in terms of which approach. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just, you also have to think about what your travel style is and what you want to get out of it. Some people really like, I don't like to use points on hotels a lot. So like hotels haven't been as big a deal. Like the cards that I have, I just take advantage of the free night once a year, but I'm not necessarily trying to get more hotel points, or haven't been. More recently, I'm starting to like change the way we travel, and I'm thinking, well, maybe we've started getting more of the premium hotel cards because they give you free breakfast and free lounge access, which can sometimes mean free dinner. And so, and then, upgrades. And so there's things that have evolved over the years of playing the credit card point game for sure, as our travel style has changed or travel interest has changed.
But the novelty dies pretty quickly, in my opinion. I don't know if you experienced this. Like the lounge access, yeah, it's great, but then everybody gets a lounge access, so there's no more exclusivity. And I remember when I was in
Yeah.
Denver, or was it? Yeah, Denver or somewhere. It's like where the Delta Sky Lounge is. And I remember I was going in, I was like, holy hell, there's so much people and there's like waiting in line. So I was like, screw this. I'm eating a Panda Express at my home.
Yeah. Yeah, things says a lot. I think, you know, one of my first actually United cards was actually one that gave us access to the clubs. And I had that for several years, but then they started to get more crowded and other things. But yeah, it's definitely evolved. I mean, it's kind of like if everyone's an elite, no one's an elite anymore. And if everyone has access to like this, it's lounge, it's not really a premium lounge anymore. So that has definitely become a problem. I would say I'm also like very cyclical in my mindset. I go through spurts from like, oh, I want to take a little bit of a break. And then we go on a trip and I'm like, okay, now I need to build up my points again so that I can get more excited about trying to get more cars. But I've not been one that consistently is doing it month in, month out to try to rack up the points because I get burnt out a little bit or I get tired of figuring out what the next card is or dealing with like the banks that maybe decline you for a card or make it more difficult to get a card. So it's definitely been a cyclical thing for me on and off, an on and off kind of process over the years.
Yeah, because eventually you get all the cards, right? It's like Pokemon got to catch them all type stuff. When you catch them all, you're like, what else do I have to do? And you've done all that research, the novelty dies off. I feel it's funny. I remember there was a interview. I'm pretty sure you know the J.P. Morgan, Damon, like the CEO, Diamond.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the interviewer was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of travel hacking?" He was like, "What's that?" That's the And I was like, wow,
That's
what a
funny.
flex. Like everyone uses Chase for the points, and that's one of the more valuable points on the transferable cards. And it was just like, oh, this guy didn't even know anything about travel hacking. I mean, granted, he's one of the richest people in the world, but like,
Right.
really?
Right. Yeah.
So,
No, at point I do wonder where I'll just get really tired of it and I'll just, you know, if our numbers are comfortable enough, like just start spending the cash on it because I'm tired of playing the game of credit cards and dealing with all the hoops because it is getting a little bit harder to get cards. And as you said, once you have a card, it's harder sometimes to get it again, or it's banks can constantly make rules that make it harder and harder. So at some point, I think I'm just going to get fed up with it and probably just not want to deal with it anymore or take a much longer break.
yeah, I mean, both of us are pretty frugal, and there are some cards that have these huge sign-up bonus, but requires you to spend a lot of money. How have you kind of strategized like the amount of money that you're spending to get these sign-up bonus?
That's a good question. Yeah, I have to plan out how I'm going to meet every spending bonus. That's for me, but also for my wife. That's kind of one of her rules. She's happy with me to sign up for new cards, but we have to have a plan in place. And so I know the frequent when I have big spends like certain times a year for insurance and taxes. And so if I have a card coming up, even if it's a big one, I'll have to like lay out, okay, well, I have these four bills and this tax payment. It has to be all planned out. And yeah, there'll be more stuff that comes up. That means I'll need it a little bit faster, but I can't just go in and expect, going blind and figure out how I'm going to do it once I got the card. And I don't, so everything I spend money on is stuff I would spend money on normally. I'm not spending extra money to meet a sign up bonus. Although I will say this a couple of months ago, I did pay a little bit extra tax right before filing my taxes, but I got that refunded within a month. So to me, it was actually like got to float a little bit longer, but that would be the only situation where I'd probably pay more money than I really have to meet a sign up bonus. I mean, if I had to pay like $5 here, $10 there because there's a fee to use a card, fine. But I'm not going to go buy a bunch of stuff just because I need to meet a bonus that I would never have spent the money on in the first place. So I have to be a little more
Yeah.
disciplined in doing that. But that I'm fine with that rule, and that I think keeps me from getting into trouble, and then also going really crazy in the game.
Yeah, it's really hard for people who are frugal and you're trying to reap the benefits of the sign-up bonus. You obviously you have to plan it out, right? Sometimes you're eating out to dinner with a bunch of friends. Let's say it's like 10 people. You're like, I'm paying for this, so I could get the sign-up bonus, and everyone could like, give me cash or Venmo or whatever. And it's hard. And also, in my opinion too, and this is where I am now, and you could, I hope to get your opinion on this, is that the percentage, right? The percentage that you get from spending money on a card. For example, the gold, like an MX gold, where you get 4% in points back in restaurants and groceries, and I think I think restaurants and groceries, and then where for example the Chase Sapphire. preferred where you get 3x on restaurants and things like that. But then when you're not spending that much money, like I did the math, right? For example, I did have the Chase Sapphire Preferred. It's $95 per year. You get 3x on I think three different categories. One of them is like restaurants. And I'm not spending money on restaurants. I often eat at home and I'm doing all the calculation. I already got the sign up bonus and they just had a new sign up bonus actually. At the time I
Hmm.
had 80,000. Now they're at 100,000. So, and I think, but you have to go to the bank. But these sign up bonuses is where you win. And when you're not spending that much money, yeah, 3% is fine and all that, but then it doesn't adds up to like the annual sign up bonus. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, I agree that I'll still spend on some of my cards. I get 2x or 3x or 4x, which I'm in between bonuses, sign up bonuses. But like, yeah, at the end of the year, you're like, well, I only earned that much money and that many points. It's not a lot. I mean, it's an okay amount, but it's not the same as like you sign up for 1, 2 cards, and I'll get more points in a year from two cards than it will two sign up bonuses than it will from just recurring spend on other cards. Even if I try to maximize, the categories that give more points. So really, it is the sign up bonuses that are the best way. Some people I know will look at their other benefits of cards, like maybe you get a free night certificate for a hotel if you spend so much money. But I can't even fathom spending those money. I don't have that money to spend just to get those extra perks that some of these people that have like big businesses could spend, tens of thousands of dollars a month and, get all these extra perks. But it definitely is hard if you don't have the sign up bonuses or
Yeah,
have a
and
business that just churns, spent money left and right.
yeah, this is I like to call this like the credit card financial independence paradox where you are trying to get you're trying to save money on your travel, but you have to spend more, but you don't spend more, so it's hard for you to get the sign up bonus. So it's like this you're in this kind of like double-edged sword. It's like a paradox in a way where you think that it's going to happen, but it actually makes you a little bit worse. Man, and the crazy thing is like, do you know how credit cards make money?
Through the swag fees and through
Yeah,
interest. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And you would think, right, that I was watching a video about credit cards. You would think that they make a lot of money from people who are in a worse financial situations because they're spending money that they don't have. The pay now, buy now, pay later aspect of credit card, which is a good benefits depending on what you want to do with it. But the main customers that is a cash cow from these credit card companies are people like us, not necessarily like us frugality perspective, but people like us in a way that we spend a significant amount of money on
Mhm.
stuff because
Right.
the way that these that these credit cards company are making like 3% back on 2 to 3% back on every transactions, and when you're spending a lot of money, and that's why these sign up bonuses are that much, is because you're spending 15 grand, right, for an Amex Gold or Amex Platinum. You have to spend 15 grand in a span of 3 months, and that 15,000, 3% of that, and then you get these points, which is great, but you still have to spend and the business have to pay for it. And sometimes nowadays, like if you go to a coffee shop, they add the surcharge on top of if you use credit cards. So now you have to pay for it. So
Yeah.
are you really getting the points or are you, making somebody else richer?
Right. Both. But yeah. Yeah, and that's why like it's I'm curious how long it's gonna last. I know there are proposals out there to like cap the swipe fees that, can be charged and all that, but who knows? But it's to be honest, in some ways I almost wish that this could go away so I don't have to play this game anymore. Because it's like so tempting to want to really go and get even further into it, but to your point, I don't have all these expenditures to do it. It's just like, I can't do it the way I really want to do it. But so in some ways, I just wish it would go away, and then I don't have to think about it, and just no one to think about it, and there's not this like pressure of like, well, they're doing it, I should do it. I should be able to like sign up for a new card every month and get all the points, and like, yeah, but they have a business, and I don't have like a business that spends a lot of money, so it's just not going to work.
Yeah,
So it's like
I don't
it's
know.
like a love hate relationship with it almost.
Yeah, because initially, right, you have the like you mentioned earlier, the shiny object syndrome. Like you just, oh my God, like there's this whole new world. Like when you find a financial independence, holy hell, there's like it's a whole brand new world. And I think we're at the point where we kind of outgrew it, we kind of knew of just about majority of the cars, the hacks. We have our own
For
book
sure.
and the cars itself.
Yeah.
But then at this moment, our strategy is just like you get a car, like you churn the hell out of it, meaning that you just reap the benefits and then you move on to the next one, or you downgrade, or you just cancel altogether. And that's kind of like the strategy. And we just want to travel at the end of the day for free.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are your strategy now in terms of traveling, right? You have all these points. What are the ways, like let's say you start from step one. Okay, I find few destinations, then what?
So I always have a list of places in the background that I want to go to, and then I'm always just searching, for availability given the 3 or 4 times a year that we like to travel and just see what's there. So I'm not one that's always set on like, okay, November I need to go to this place. I will, keep it open based on availability. And fortunately there are a lot of tools out there that help finding availability for flights, but we're flexible in where we go. And I enjoy going to new places over places I've been. So in some ways that's good, but it also makes it a little bit harder because I've been to 70 countries now. And so there are fewer places in the world to go that I still want to go, but they're out there. But I think our style has changed a little bit too over the years. And we're definitely now that I'm doing this more longer and I'm a few years outside of working that we're trying to upgrade things a little bit more. So longer distance flights, we used to be okay in economy. Now we're like, okay, if it's over 6 or 8 hours, we need to try to do business class, which costs more points, but then that's fine. We just have to be, a little more aggressive getting cards. We used to spend a lot of time in Airbnbs, which I couldn't use points for, but now I'm starting to see the benefits of hotels. Just with certain cards, you can get free breakfast and free lounge access, which could basically be free dinner. So then you really only have to get one meal a day, kind of thing. And it's just nice to potentially get upgraded to a suite or a nicer room in a hotel. So I'm starting to move into hotels again over, Airbnbs, but really just, I think the big thing is just upgrading the way we're traveling now. And that's how the credit card points work. I mean, it may cost $10,000 to fly round trip to Asia in business class, but I can get there for a lot less spend on, a lot less with credit card points. I mean, a few sign up bonuses will give me round trip for Asia.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think once you get these points, you still have the same frugality mindset, right? Like, yeah, you're traveling for free, but you're still frugal on the points, which you did spend money on, but this is technically like not money. It's like free money in a way. But then you're also are just as frugal as with your own money, and you're taking that in as if that is your own money. So now you're kind of seeing of like maybe we want to get a little bit more leg room, given that we're at the age where we can reap that benefits, and that's okay, as opposed to a college student who it's just absurd to me how they get accepted for like Amex Platinum, which is the highest and the most expensive credit cards, and they get accepted and they're trying to travel free, but it's what they call it, like it's a coupon book now, where
Yeah.
you're like trying to sign up for stuff, and you're trying to make sure that the 700 makes sense, but at the same time, you're trying to save money on the points itself. But now where you at, and I'm the same way. As we were on the call, but before this call, I mentioned that we spent a little bit of money on the flight just because we want to get more leg room and more comfortability, given that it was a 20+ hour kind of flight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
style, needs and style kind of evolve over time, and there's no right or wrong way to play the points game. I mean, some people would rather have like 10 round trips in economy, or someone will like, I want to fly first class and on a plane with the shower in the sky kind of thing, and
Yeah.
they get one trip out of that. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just have to decide what's right for you.
Have you used credit card in, I guess, in an untraditional way, in a way? Do you know any strategies for credit cards that you want to share?
Untraditional ways,
Yeah. Not like, I would say not your everyday people would know. I would say
I
for
think.
let me give you an example while you think. For
Mhm.
example, what I do in real estate, I would buy houses with credit card points. I would extract the credit, just like a balance transfer in a way, and I would use that to spend money on like buying a house or renovating like for renovations costs or closing costs. So it's like it's a cash thing. And what's sometimes good about it is that not the balance transfer, but if I pay myself with the credit cards, and obviously I'll get the 3% surcharge and things like that. What's good about it is that I get the sign up bonus because it looks like a purchase transaction. So that was one way that I was able to, one, get the sign up bonus, and then two, use it on an asset that appreciates in value, right? Because I'm just using it for mostly acquisitions or renovations. And once I refinance, and that's usually when I get the cash out, I pay off the credit cards, and then I get the sign up bonus. So it's like a win-win for all for me. So that's one of the, I guess, non-traditional way that people use credit cards. People just use credit cards, get points, and then they reap the reward.
Yeah, I can't think of anything like that. I mean, I think again for me it was something that I had just learned about in the last year, as I talked about with the taxes, that I knew that you could pay like estimated taxes with your credit card, and there's a fee to that, but I never thought about overpaying taxes, especially close to, the filing deadline. So I did a small amount, but I've heard of people that they'll get a sign up bonus that, requires $15,000-$20,000 spend. Early March, have their taxes ready, go pay another $20,000 of their taxes, file them, and then before they actually have to pay the credit card bill, they'll get the refund. And I just learned about that the last year, and so I thought that was pretty cool. But again, I don't know if I call that totally untraditional, but it's still like something I haven't thought of before, and it's playing the game a little bit, and it worked this year, so I might be more open to putting a larger amount on it next year for sure. But
Yeah.
other than that, I think I've tried to stay away for stuff that like where you have to like it's either a gray area or you have to read online how people make it work. I know there's like weird things about people doing credit cards and money orders and stuff, and some circular thing where it just sounds shady to me. So I'm like, if I have to research it like beyond just one post, I'm like, I'm probably not going to want to dive into it and try to get myself in trouble with it.
Yeah. There are definitely a lot of gray areas in credit cards, and people take risk stuff. I mean, Build. Have you seen like the new Build stuff that they just came out with?
Yeah, that you can. I think anyone can pay rent. I think if I was a renter, I'd definitely get a build card because that's you know a big expense that you can't normally put on a credit card. But now they have a credit to do that. I actually have health insurance that the health insurance company only takes ACH. I've looked into some of those processors that like a Plastique or a Melio that will help pay your bills through a credit card, but I couldn't get comfortable with it because they had to mail them a check, and then they charge a 3% fee, and I wasn't sure, but someday I might look into that. But
Yeah, I tried using Build for auto payment, like car payment. They gave me like a warning. I was like, this is a no. I was like, okay, let me not do that anymore. But it's just like a slap on the wrist. But so Build is not just for rent. I think that's what they advertise and that they market really well
okay.
is get 1x per dollar on rent. But it's actually anything house related, because you could do utility bills, because utility bills, they mostly take ACH payment, and you could do that now with Build or Wi-Fi. That's what I use. Pay like Verizon or Comcast to pay for your bills. So anything like house related wise, I think you're gonna be okay. It's just rent is a significant, usually for most people, it is a significant expense out of your day to day, right? Usually it's 30%
Yeah.
of their expenses, maybe more. So that's why they advertise it. But I think there was news that Wells Fargo, which is what the bank that Build uses, that they're ending their contract pretty soon. I don't think they were making any money.
Yeah, I think they actually, yeah, I saw that a few months ago. I think their contract actually goes to 2029, but it sounds like they're not making a lot of money. So there was definitely some questions of like how long it would last, but Built seems to keep adding partners and new, features. So something's working there. I have heard too that for certain like utilities and stuff, it's maybe possible to find them on PayPal, certain vendors, and that way, you can pay through PayPal, but then it attaches to the credit card that you have on your PayPal profile. I tried to do that and can't really find the utilities or vendors in my area. I can see them for like other cities or other states, but so it's something that if people are looking for like additional ways to put on a credit card, try looking for the vendor on PayPal.
Interesting. I never heard about that. Usually they have Venmo, which is what sometimes as a landlord you can have your tenant pay through Venmo. But I never heard about the PayPal one. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, and they're kicking, going back to the build stuff, they're kicking new partners and they bringing people in. I remember at the time where you could do American airline points, and American Airlines, one of the hardest, and
Okay.
it's I'm in Philly, so the hub is American Airlines, and there's only so much cards related to it, and there's I don't think you could transfer with any of the Chase, the Amex, the Capital One, the City. Like you can't transfer to maybe City, but you can't transfer American Airline points or use their points to transfer to American Airlines. Bill was actually the only one, and they ended that, I think, last year or 2 years ago. And I remember transferring majority of my bill points into American Airlines just because I'm an American Airlines hub. And then now they just added back on like the Southwest companion pass, not companion
Mm-hmm.
pass, the Southwest points. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, American is definitely hard. I actually have money in a savings account that earns American Airlines miles. I don't know if you heard about that with Bass Bank.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you basically right now they're paying like 2 miles for every dollar you have invested. So I don't get any cash interest, but I get points. And so that's a sort of a passive way of earning American Airlines miles.
Yeah, but that's the same way, like what we talked about with the, was it points back on your credit cards, right? These 3%, these 2%. Well, on savings, unless you have, millions of dollars in savings, then yeah, the American airline points make sense. But at the same time, you obviously, the more money you put on the savings, the other opportunity costs that you might have incurred on other stuff or other opportunities. So I remember you were telling me about that. Can you tell a little bit more of how that works? Is there fees involved, and do you have to hold it in an account for a certain amount of time?
So there's no fees. And so it basically like think of it an online savings account, but instead of paying, 4% cash interest, it pays in American Airlines miles. And they had a promo of, I think if you had like $50,000 in there for 6 months, they give you an extra 10,000 points. But basically every month I get, you know, two points per dollar. And it's a function of the interest rates. I think at one point it was 2.5 points per dollar, and it's gone down. And, so as interest rates move, the number of points they'll pay out will move. It doesn't earn the loyalty points from American, which is how you get status. It just earns redeemable points. But since there's really not a transferable partner, it's one of the easier ways to earn American Airlines miles for sure. And it's just what is interesting is that from an interest standpoint, so I get a 1099 at the end of the year. They value it about like zero point 0.4 cents a mile. So it's less, my 1099 is smaller than if I had actually gotten a comparable 4% of cash interest for the same dollar amount. So there's
Interesting.
a slightly smaller tax implication for those points than earning the interest in cash.
And the points that you receive from credit cards are not they're not taxable, right? I just wanted to confirm that. I know you're not
Correct.
a
The
CPA,
especially the
but
sign-on bonuses. Yeah, all that stuff I think is considered a rebate, like the sign-on bonuses, the 2 points, 3x or 4x points. The only time I think that it's taxable is if you refer someone and they pay you out a bonus. That
yeah,
is taxable, and you may get a 1099 if you meet a certain minimum threshold.
yeah. What's insane too, I don't know if you go on the points guy, but a couple months ago they went a little bit political with what is called I'm reading it here, the Credit Card Competition Act. So what it would do, it would undermine consumer credit card rewards. So they would cap fees through forced competition, which makes it impossible for basically the sign up bonus that we get now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I've seen them heavily, push against that. It's interesting. I think this is one of those where I'm like, when I love the credit card games, I'm like, I don't want it to happen. But in the days where I'm like fed up with it or tired of it or got declined from a bank, I'm like, fine, just put that rule into place so we can all be out of our misery. And, I don't feel like I'm missing out because, my FOMO of not having like all these points will go away because no one else can have those opportunities. But I understand that if they cap those fees, how like they probably wouldn't be able to pay those points. But I just don't see it happening. I think
Yeah,
there's,
especially.
it's just the
Yeah, go ahead.
industry is just there's too many players in there that'll push back on it.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think in America, where there are a lot of consumers, people would want to spend more money, and you want to incentivize that as a business owner, not a business owner for the cards, but the business owners of the cards, right? The
Okay.
banks, the processors, and things like that. I think that, and the crazy thing about it is that in Europe, it's completely different is what this Credit Card Competition Act actually entails. And if you look at the comparison, like for example, the Amex Gold, if you get it in the US versus the Amex Gold that you get in parts of Europe, the benefits are significantly lower than, than the one in the US.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's just
interesting.
insane. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I hadn't realized that, but I think, and that's where like sort of the challenge for me still is with this industry is like there's so much involved here with it that there's that everything is a shiny object that you can get sucked into it and really want to go down a rabbit hole trying to figure it all out.
What advice would you give someone who's starting out in a credit card game?
So the most important thing is if you're going to get into credit cards, you have to pay off your balance every month. If you have to pay any interest, you're just losing out whatever benefits you may get from that credit card spend. And so it just defeats the purpose. The other thing is set up auto pay. It's easy to think, oh, I'm going to go in there every month and look at the statement and then send my bank to pay it. But just the credit card companies make it really easy. You connect your bank account and you say auto pay on the statement due date, and it's set it, forget it, and you never have to worry about it again. As long as you have money in your checking account, they'll pay it off. You'll be good. So those are the two things. And then just don't spend more than you have to. I mean, this is not you can float it, but don't get into I need to spend $5,000 in 3 months. I don't know if I could do that. Well, I'll just go buy a bunch of stuff that I may or may not need. Don't do that. Find ways if you want those sign-on bonuses, find ways to maybe move expenses up, like pay a few months of it your cell phone bill or your electricity bill if you can, but don't go buying a bunch of things that you don't need just to meet the bonus.
Yeah, makes sense. It's talking about like spending money now and pay it off later. Have you seen the Coachella news?
I do not actually.
Coachella, I don't know if you know it, it's a very popular kind of music festival. So you have different varieties of musicians and artists and things like that. And it's very, very glamorized and it's very, very expensive. The ticket itself, just for, I don't know how many days, but I was looking at it, but it's like a few days and $600 just to get it. And that doesn't include the absurd fees that they give you to spend money on drinks, on food. And what's crazy is that I think, was it 60 or 80%? So don't quote me on this. People that goes to Coachella finance their tickets. and what's also insane is that what's furthermore to make it even worse is that they're not using like Klarna or one of those buy now pay later platform. They actually have like Coachella have their own platforms. And you have to pay additional fees if you want to pay later, and they incur all the interest from that. So there's no other like overhead fees from other third party, and I don't know. It's insane. Like, and it's all over social media. But I saw in the news, and I was like, wow, people are financing like $600 just for a small experience, just so you could get that.
Yeah, I even see with airlines now that you can finance the purchase of your ticket. They have a provider, usually provider connected to the paying process. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who just starting out the financial independence journey?
I think the most important thing is, some of the important things are to understand what you spend your money on and make sure you're invested in the market, because they say time in the market is more important than time in the market. So if you keep things simple, that's great. That'll lead you on a path to financial independence. It may take longer than, other paths, but it's a path that will definitely work. But understanding your spend and then making sure you're investing whatever leftover money you have is it's really I think that to me, the two basic tenets of, achieving financial independence. You need to know how much you spend so that you know how much money you need to have, and then you need to be investing as soon as you can, because the longer you're in the market, the more money you'll make. Kind of very, very straightforward, but easier. It can be easier said than done, but I think those are the two simple things to do, and just kind of know yourself and know your plan and understand it. It might take a little bit of time, and you may have to have some delayed gratification, but you can still enjoy your life. I mean, the key too is don't go in there saying I'm going to spend nothing every year. I'm going to go live at home, or live in the living room of a place that has 3 other roommates, and you're miserable doing it, eating rice and beans or whatever. That's not going to work either. So you have to make sure that you do enjoy the journey as well. And so if it means that it takes you a little bit longer to get there, but you're still like spending time with your friends, taking track trips, going to concerts or what things that you enjoy, that'll be much better than just, going all in, I think, and, being miserable for 3 to 5 years or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because sometimes when you're in that journey, you think that you kind of emphasize the word sacrifice, especially when people who are just starting out, usually in their 20s, and the financial independence stuff, where you are super super frugal. And we had one guy who's in the camp, in the financial independence event that we were at, and I won't say his name, but he was driving a really beat down car, like to the point where you got to have like some sort of screw underneath the steering wheel, and you got to crank up, and then and that's how you turn
Yeah.
it on. And then the check it, like it was just a full rainbow on the headset, but he was driving from like Houston to Dallas. It was a couple hours. I'm like, how the hell do you survive? It was like, yeah, I mean, it's just a few more. But that's
There,
that's
there
like the
needs,
huge
yeah,
sacrifice. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. There needs to be, I think, in my mind, some, you know, limits from the bottom standpoint that like it's just, I mean, maybe if you were good with cars, okay, fine, you could do that. You could drive a beat up car, but I know how to maintain the cars, and because I really like that. But at some point, it's just like if something happens to that car, then you don't need another car. What are you gonna do? At that point, where yeah, there's some limits that I think if you don't have to drive yourself to that level, then more power to you, and that's the way to it'll be better if you can.
Yeah, there's a
But
point where you could have where you are frugal, you're saving money, but there are also other times where convenience and time are significantly more important. And you just got to find that balance depending of where you are. Good example, what you've just mentioned was not just now, but early in this episode, was that the business class stuff, right? You are you already are reaping the rewards, but at the same time, the convenience of having that little bit of a leg room give you a healthy, healthy legs. You don't want to be in a 16-hour flight, and then you're kind of cramped in this tight space with other people, and you kind of have a hard time. But then when you're in that kind of more comfortable business class, you have that more convenience of your life, of health.
yeah, and I think the convenience is something that we've started to appreciate more and pay for more as we're getting older and further into this journey. That I used to like not pay for certain things, but now I'm like, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm going to pay for someone to do it, or I'm going to pay for this extra benefit because like I you know I can. And I think that's someone too. Like early on in the journey, like maybe you start cutting back on things, but then you realize like I really want to have someone clean my house. Okay, well then spend that money. If that
Yeah.
if that gives you joy because you don't have to go clean the house, go spend the money. And maybe it means you have to, invest a little bit more or take a little bit longer, but you know, you're not depriving yourself of something that was really important to you. So there's a kind of a, you know, trial and error there on what things you can kind of pull out, and then what things realize after time. No, I want to put it back in there. Like when we learned about financial independence, we stopped going to a gym, and we were fine working out outside most of the time. And now 3 years later, we're like, maybe we want to go back to a gym just because to be to have do something different than what we're doing. So it's okay to make changes. And it's okay to kind of try things and then add them back or take them out. It's not one of those like on day one I gotta cut out everything and just that's how I'm going to be for the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a good way to finish off this podcast. I can't ask any more questions after that. Stephen, where can people find more about you?
So I am on Facebook. It's Stephen Lind, and my wife and I we do a little bit of blogging. We used to be blog more back a few years ago, but we do have a blog. It's at the dragonsonfire.wordpress.com, and you can leave that, I'm sure, in the show notes. But there you can find out a little bit here about our early retirement journey and kind of what we're doing these days. We blog anonymously, but that's us if you find that blog.
That's awesome. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. We had a tremendous and awesome conversation about just life in general and the financial independence space. But it's great to have you, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Kaizen Blueprint podcast. If you got value from today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. And don't forget to stay connected. Subscribe to our newsletter at kaizenblueprint.com for exclusive insights, resources, and updates. Keep striving for growth, take action. And remember, small, consistent improvements create massive impact. See you on the next episode. Peace out.